Good night. Have one time tonight. God is good and God is good all the time. My name is Irma Jail Spirit Divine. I'm here to give you a word on tonight. Um, the topic gonna be trusting God. Trusting God. Now we know Abraham had trusted God. You know, and you know God was testing his faith. So this story about trusting God in your storm. You know, will you trust God when everything is falling apart, when things don't make sense? You know, will you still trust God? You know, when you don't understand, will you still trust God? You know, will you still trust God? Now we see that Abraham, he didn't understand, you know, but he still trusts God. You know, he taking his only son up there in the mountain to be sacrificed, you know, but he trusts God and he believed that God was gonna provide for him. You know, so first, you know, I'm gonna start with Abraham. You know, because Abraham, that's why God loved the Abraham so much, and the Israelite is part of Abraham. You know, because Abraham took his only son up there, doing just what God had instructed him to do. You know, so God also was testing Abraham. You know, with his son, a son what he been waiting for a long time. Him and Sarah been waiting for a son for a long time, and then God came along and said, "Bring that son, bring your only son that you love, cause you know God loved Jesus, and that was His only son." You know, so He said, "Bring your son." You know, the son that you love so much, you know, and Abraham did just what God had asked him to do. You know, he trusted God and he believed that God was going to provide for him. So, Genesis chapter 22 and 1. God tested Abraham and told Abraham to take your son, who you love, Isaac, and go and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain. You know, I will show you, you know. And so the next morning, you know, Abraham took his two servants, he took Isaac, you know, and when he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place that God had told him about. You know, so he climbed up there. He saw the mountain. He saw what God had showed him. You know, to bring Isaac. You know, so Abraham had looked up and he saw the place far distant. You know, so Abraham said to his servant, "Now you stay here, you know, with the donkey while I and my boy will go over there, but we will worship and then we will come back." Now he told it to his servants. Now if he told his servants that we going up there, he supposed to be going to sacrifice his son, you know, but he gonna tell his servants that he will be back. You know, so that means he trusted God. He believed that God gonna provide for him to tell his servant, him and his son coming back. You know, so he didn't understand. You know, he don't know what God was planning. He don't know how God gonna stop it or whatever the case is. He did not know, but all he know that God was gonna provide. You know, and that him and his son is coming back. He don't know how God gonna do it, but he know God gonna provide. You know, because he trusted God. You know, he trusted God with his only son. You know how long Isaac and Isaac and his wife had been waiting. Rebecca had been waiting for a son. You know, been waiting for a son for a long time, and for him to trust, he trusts God that much to take his only son that he been waiting for a long time, and and God want him to sacrifice. You know, but he trusted God. He trusted God because he told his servant, "Me and my son will be back." You know, so Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. Now he doing everything in motion. Now he laid his son down. You know, he putting the wood, he putting everything on top of his son to be sacrificed. You know, but he loved and trusted God that much that he going to all the extent, even to raise his hand up over his son. You know, so and he placed it on his son Isaac. Isaac had spoke and said, "What is the lamb for the burnt offering?" So Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Now he bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Now Isaac, he's a smart little boy. Now he say, okay, I see all the wood. I see everything that you getting for this sacrifice, but the only thing I don't see, what is the sacrifice? Where is the lamb? Where is the animal that you supposed to be sacrificed? I see the wood, I see the knife, I see everything that you have. But what is the lamb? What is the animal that you're supposed to be sacrificed? So Abraham could not tell his son, you is the sacrifice. So he told his son, God gonna provide everything that we need. Don't worry, God gonna provide. So Abraham looked up. He saw the place from a distance. So now Abraham took the wood and he was ready to sacrifice his son. And he said, God will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, and he bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar to sacrifice him. He did everything in motion to sacrifice his son. So he bound his son Isaac, and lay him on the altar. He laid him down and everything on top of the wood. Put him on top of the wood to be sacrificed. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven. He said, Abraham, Abraham. God said, do not lay a hand on your son. Do not lay a hand on your son. Do not do anything to him. God said, I know that you fear God because you have not withheld your son, your only son, to be sacrificed. He went through the whole process. Before he could slice his son, the angel said, stop. God said, don't put a hand on your son. Don't put a hand on your son. Don't do anything. Because God see that you fear God. God see that you trust him. So he said, look behind you. Look behind you. There's your animal right there. See, God works right on time. When he had his hand up there to slay his son, God called out from heaven and said, don't lay a hand on your son. So God see how Abraham had trust his only son. Trust his only son to be sacrificed. Lay him on top of the wood. Put the knife in his hand to raise over his son to sacrifice. God said, put the knife down. Do not touch your son. Just look behind you. There's a ram right behind you. And that's when Abraham took his son down. Put that ram on top and sacrificed that ram. God is amazing. God know he wasn't going to let Abraham sacrifice his son. He been waiting for a long time. God said, do not lay a hand on your son. He withheld, from touching his son. Abraham, he said, look up. Look up. That is a ram, right behind you. And so and that's when Abraham sacrificed the ram instead of his son. It's as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place the Lord will provide. And see, that's how we have to do. That's what God wants us to do. God wants us to trust him. Mine is going so long because I have to fully trust him. And you have to be still. So I have to be still. I have to fully let God, fully trust God, to let God handle everything, just like Abraham did. Abraham fully trusts God in his heart. He went through the whole motion. with his son. Even the son had to speak up and say, okay, I see the knife, I see the wood, I see everything you got to be sacrificed, but I don't see no ram. What is the animal? What is the sheep? What is the animals to be sacrificed? I see everything that you have, but I don't see the animal to be sacrificed. This is a young boy that pay attention. He paid attention of what his daddy was doing, or what his daddy was about to do. You know, and see, Isaac was young. He saw how his daddy loved God and was trusting God. So Abraham looked up and that sacrifice was right behind. So now we see that Abraham trusts God with his son. He knew God will provide. He was scared. He had a little fear in him. He loved the Isaac. He waited a long time for Isaac. So for him to sacrifice his son, or thought he was going to sacrifice his son, but at the same time, he trusted God because he believed that God will provide. You know, so now we see that Abraham trusts God. So God was testing Abraham. God was testing Abraham. Because God knew he about to bring his son in. He about to bring his son in. And see, God do things right on time. He know when the right time to bring Jesus in. He about to bring he was bringing his only forgotten son. Bring him on earth to sacrifice, to be a sacrificer for all of us. So he wanted to see if anybody else gonna take their only son that they love. Because God loved his son. Abraham loved his son. So he wanted to see if anybody else that loved their only son to bring to be sacrificed. Because I'm about to bring my son on who I love to be a sacrifice for all of us. So I want to see if anybody else could do the same thing that I'm about to do. So he saw that Abraham was. Abraham trusted God enough with his son. Trusted him and God. Just like Abraham was trusting God, God was testing Abraham. And he passed the test. Abraham passed the test. So we see that God was testing Abraham with his son to see if he will sacrifice his only son that he loved and that he waited for a long time. That he had to get a slave to have sex with to get a child. And so God said, "No, to be the heir, I wanted you and Sarah, Rebecca's Sarah to have your own child, your own flesh and blood." So Abraham passed the test, and because God, would have his only son to be sacrificed, so God sees that Abraham feared God. He said, "I see you fear God." He said, "I see you fear God." He said, "Do not touch your son. What you need is right behind you." So God sees that Abraham fear him. Remember, Abraham told his servants. Remember, Abraham told his servant, "Look, you stay right here and watch our donkey. Because see, me and my son, we going up there to worship, but guess what? We coming right back." And trust me, he came right back. Abraham trusts God, knowing that he will provide. Not Abraham returned back to his servant like he said. He said, "You stay here, I will be back." So now everything is done, and Abraham back with his servant like he said. And they set off together in Beersheba. So he trusted God when it didn't make sense. He trusted God when he didn't understand. He trusted God when he wanted him to sacrifice his son. When he know it didn't make no sense at all. See, a lot of time God will have us doing stuff that don't make sense, that you don't understand. But guess what? We got to still trust God. Abraham still trusted God. He ain't understand. He didn't understand what God wanted him to bring his son up there. He could have said, "Well, why? Why I got to bring my son up here? Why I got to sacrifice?" But he asked no question. He just trusted God and did what God said do. And a lot of times we ask too many questions. When God gave us command. I'm talking to myself. Sometimes we ask too many questions. You see, Abraham asked no question. "Okay, you need me to bring my son up there? Okay, the mountain way up there? Oh, okay, you want me to bring my son? Oh, okay, I'm bringing my son up there. You know, he brought all the supplies and everything he need. Even the baby said, I see everything that you have. Okay, but what is the sacrifice? You know, even the boy asked, so Abraham trusted God, when he didn't understand. He trusted God when it didn't make no sense to bring his only son up there. But God, I prayed to you for this son for a long time. And you want me to sacrifice this son? I prayed for a long time for this child. But Abraham still trusted God. And he brought his son up there on that hill. He told his servant, look, you stay right here. I'm coming back. And he told his son, his son's like, well, where's the sacrifice? Well, God will provide. So we see that God did provide. And we see that God, just like Abraham was trusting God, God was testing Abraham, and Abraham passed the test. So now sometime you may never understand, when God give you a command to do something. You might not, understand you. It may not make no sense, but at the end of the day, it will make sense. Because God always have a perfect plan. It don't never be dumb. It don't never be stupid. It always be a perfect plan. But at the time, you know, we don't understand. At the time, it don't make sense to us. But at the end of the day, it does. At the end of the day, and everything he does, it always have a meaning to it. Just like he had Abraham to take his son out there to be sacrificed. That was a meaning behind that. Because he had his own forgotten son, to be sacrificed. So that was a test of Abraham to see if you gonna do that. Cause I'm about to do that with my son. For all of y'all, for all of us. So just like Abraham, was testing God. God was testing. I mean, Abraham was trusting God, but God was testing Abraham. And we see that Abraham passed the test. So one, we see that God will have his only son, Jesus, to be sacrificed for the whole world. Two, he wanted to see if anyone else would give up this son, that they love. You know, three, God tested Abraham with his only son Isaac that he prayed for, that he waited for. He made a mistake with the slave girl, but God said, "No, you're gonna have your own flesh and blood. You're gonna have your own son." Even though that was his son, even though that was flesh and blood, but God, Sarah is gonna be the mother of the nation, so they had to have their own flesh and blood son together. He gonna be the nation of the world. She gonna be the mother of the nation. So they had to have their own child, and that was Isaac was a miracle child because they both was in old age when they had Isaac. So for Abraham fear entrusted God. He believed that God gonna will provide. So Abraham had said yes, because he trusts God. He didn't understand. It didn't make no sense to him to bring his son up there, but he trusted God. He trusted God. Abraham said yes. When God gave him a command, he just said, okay, yes, okay. You need me to bring my son up there? Okay. He got all the supplies that he need and his son. So in his mind, he knew that God wasn't going to really have him to sacrifice his son because he told the servant that God will provide. He told Isaac, God will provide. So he had faith. So Abraham had said yes to something he didn't even understand. But he knew God was going to provide. So Abraham returned back to his servant just like he told his servant he will do. You know, Abraham raised his hand to sacrifice his son when God said, "Don't lay a hand on your son. All you need to do is just turn around. I provide what you need right behind you. And so the ram was right behind him, and he sacrificed that ram instead of his son. So we see when we put our trust in God, He will provide. Because He be testing us. you know. And when he see that we put our trust in him, you know, even when we don't understand, even when it don't make sense, we still have to trust God, because it might not make sense to us, you know, but at the end of the day, God always have a perfect plan that always makes sense. It may not make sense to us, but at the end of the day, it will. You know, He always have a perfect plan, you know, for us in our life. You know, and a lot of time we may not understand. It may not make sense, but it's perfectly, you know, planned and made out. You know, and he always do things right on time. Look how he took the right time to bring Jesus in. You know, so he tested Abraham. You know, so it was like years later before he brought Jesus out. You know, and Jesus had to be on the earth for a little while before he got sacrificed. You know, so that's what this story. This package is about trusting God. Trusting God in your storm. Trusting God in your storm when you don't understand. Trusting God in your storm when it don't make sense to you. Oh God, why I got to bring my son up there? This don't make sense to me. But I'm gonna trust you, God. You know, I'm gonna trust you in my only child. You know, it don't make sense to me, but whatever you need me to do, I'm gonna trust you. I'm gonna believe that you're gonna provide for me. That you're not gonna let me sacrifice my child. And by him trusting God that much, God provide for him. You know, God did not allow him to lay a hand on his son. You know, so this package is about in your storm when you don't understand it, when it don't make no sense to you. You know, will you still trust God? You know, will you still trust God? You know, we have to trust God in this wicked world, because He the only one can deal with this world, you know, and help us, you know, make it through, you know. So this all the word I have for you on tonight. Always trust God in your storm. You know, even though when you don't understand it and it don't make sense to you, still trust God. You know, so y'all have a blessed night, and I see y'all in the next video.